Russian influence has been gaining ground across Africa in recent years, placing the continent at the center of the growing geopolitical contest between the Kremlin and the White House. One such country in which this contestation is clear for everyone to see is Niger. While the US wants to prevent Chinese and Russian influence over Niger's natural resources such as uranium and petroleum, their efforts seem to be eliciting the opposite reaction. A recent Gallup analysis shows that Russia's approval rating in Africa reached 42% in 2023, up from 34% a year earlier. On the other hand, the United States of America's soft power in Africa fell from 59% in 2022 to 56% in 2023. The US was the only world power whose image deteriorated in Africa in 2023. On the other hand, China's ranking in the region rose from 52% in 2022 to 58% in 2023. That is 2 points ahead of the US. In fact, according to the same research, support for Russia remains strongest in the Sahel countries, including Mali at 89%, Burkina Faso at 81%, and Chad sitting at 76%. So the writing is on the wall for everyone to see. These statistics on how Africans view Russia are indicative of how official relations between Russia and African countries are steadily growing. And I want you to consider this. Since 2014, Russia has signed military cooperation agreements with at least 19 African countries. These generally involve supplying arms and equipment, with some military training, intelligence sharing, and other cooperation. This is happening at a time when America and her ally France are closing military bases in the same regions where Russia is signing military cooperation deals. The latest to see this shift is Niger.
Mr. Speaker, I come to the House floor this evening to expose a cover-up in the African country of Niger. This cover-up exists to conceal the humiliating failures of the Biden administration in Niger, throughout Africa, and throughout the world. You'll learn of the victims of this cover-up, the 1,100 U.S. troops who are currently stationed in Niger, functionally stranded by a Biden administration which cares more about saving face than saving their lives. Our troops in Niger have been pleading for help. They've sent intelligence reports and letters stating that they are rarely getting safe water. They can't get diplomatic oversights to receive medicine, fresh troop rotations, or basic supplies. They have no mission. And the local authorities are becoming increasingly hostile. The current government of Niger has called the U.S. presence in the country illegal.
Matthew Gaetz, an American lawyer and politician who is serving as the United States representative for Florida, speaking there about the United States military service members who are stationed in Niger, who told his office that they cannot get medicine, mail, or other support from the Pentagon. Of particular interest in that particular statement, Gaetz says that the Biden administration is hiding the true conditions on the ground of U.S. diplomatic relations in Niger. And the question is, why? Why is the Biden administration hiding their diplomatic failures in Niger? Congressman Gaetz shed some light into the U.S.-Niger diplomatic breakup.
The fact that we've got Russia as the preferred security partner now means there are Russians behind the wire at Air Base 101. We have Russians on our base somewhere. That would never happen. But the only reason it's happening is because Blinken and Biden are humiliated that their plan failed, that they poured $500 million into this country where now we're being thrown out by the scruff of our neck.
These revelations come after Niger forced the United States to stop its military operations in the country earlier in March. Niger accuses the United States of undermining its internal and external security.
The US presence on the territory of the Republic of Niger is illegal and violates all the constitutional and democratic rules which would require the sovereign people, in particular through its elected representatives, to be consulted on the installation of a foreign army on its territory.
This statement came a day after senior US officials departed Niger. They had visited Niger to salvage a security relationship that would allow Washington to continue operating a drone base in the country, that is despite suspending military aid to Niger's new government. 3 days of waiting. The delegation left without meeting the country's military commander. I'm talking about General Abdurrahman Chiani. They were diplomatically snubbed for a good reason, and that is according to the Nigerian official statement. They did not inform Niger that they were coming. In addition to that, Some countries across the African continent, including Chad, Central African Republic, Mali, and Libya, have turned towards Russia for security assistance. They're ditching the West, and Niger has joined the growing trend. Russian military trainers are already in Niger as we're speaking to reinforce the country's air defenses, providing training on how to use the equipment they brought.
Nous sommes ici pour former l'armée du Niger pour aider, en utilisant le matériel militaire arrivé ici. C'est le matériel pour différentes spécialités militaires, pour formation de spécialités militaires. Nous sommes ici pour développer la coopération militaire entre la Russie et Niger.
In a world of rapidly changing power dynamics, Washington seems to be losing its strategic foothold in Niger. And this is a big deal, especially in an election year like this. For us to appreciate why this is a big deal, let us go back to history. America's interest in Niger and other Sahel countries came after the 9/11 attacks. America saw the region's vast, sparsely populated desert as an ideal incubator for new terrorist groups. So in 2002, America launched what it called the Pan-Sahel Initiative. Washington had found in Niger a willing partner to monitor and profile people that could engage in terrorist activities. By 2013, President Barack Obama had authorized the first 100 US troops in Niger for intelligence collection. By 2016, the United States of America doubled down on its presence by announcing the construction of a drone base in the country's northern city of Agadez, where more than 1,000 US troops would eventually come to be based. But that cooperation had not aged well. In only 2 weeks since announcing the end of security ties with America, Niger hosted a delegation of Chinese oil executives seeking to expand mining operations there. Not only that, they also spoke directly with Russian President Vladimir Putin about strengthening security ties. It didn't end there. They also received the Iranian ambassador to finalize the establishment of formal diplomatic relations with Tehran, which is reportedly eyeing investments in the country's uranium sector. That is another headache for the Biden administration, especially when you're going into elections. So why is Niger suddenly changing course in terms of its diplomatic relations? Some have argued that Niger's military leaders are looking for security following their takeover from the previous government. But official reasons that were given by the Nigerians point to something deeper and indicative of why America is actually losing its diplomatic grip in the country.
When it comes to choosing diplomatic, strategic and military partners, the government of Niger regrets the willingness of the American delegation to deny the sovereign people of Niger the right to choose its partners and the types of partnerships likely to help it to truly fight terrorism.
And he is right. Following Russia's military operation in Ukraine, America has been putting pressure on countries to choose Ukraine's side. Also, America's expectation that Niger would willingly allow the United States of America to operate an intelligence collection platform on its own soil for Washington's sole benefit speaks to the condescending attitude described by the Nigerian government. In addition to that, the United States is not sharing any of the intelligence with Niger that is battling the same violent extremist organizations that America is actually there to fight. That is not only condescending, but raises the question why. What is even baffling is the fact that a senior delegation from the United States thought it reasonable to make a request for continued military presence while Russian military advisors are fanning out across the region. The US is out of touch with the shifting geopolitical movements here. The world is no longer the same. African countries are looking for new partnerships. The continent is rich and looking for win-win partnerships. Earlier this year, Italy's leadership confirmed what we have known all these years. But the US seems to acknowledge this reality that Africa is actually rich, but lacking political will to actually take action in that direction. And it's not just them. Their allies France are in the same boat next door in Chad. France was recently expelled from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, but they are not willing to let go of their military presence in that region. In fact, they recently sent an emissary to meet Chad's leadership in a bid to extend the lease on their remaining military outpost in the Sahel region. And that appears to be the same effort that is being deployed by America in Niger. America is looking for ways to remain in Niger as much as France is fighting to retain the diminishing presence in the Francophone region. The irony, of course, is that many Western officials and diplomats have seen this moment coming, and they've seen it coming for many years. The Biden administration's 2022 Africa strategy promised that no longer would the continent be relegated to a second-tier concern where the US policies treat sub-Saharan Africa as a world apart. In fact, the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken has acknowledged that too many times the countries of Africa have been treated as junior partners.
Our strategy is rooted in the recognition that sub-Saharan Africa is a major geopolitical force, one that shaped our past, is shaping our present, and will shape our future. It's a strategy that reflects the region's complexity, its diversity, its power and influence, and one that focuses on what we will do with African nations and peoples, not for.
But what is interesting is that Washington doesn't seem to mean these words. Their actions do not correspond. And this is where the Russians and the Chinese are beating them. The gap between rhetoric and reality is what sent the United States officials packing from Niger in the first place. In an era of enhanced geopolitical competition, China and Russia are coming to Africa in search of strategic minerals and political partnerships, or at least it seems. They are offering military cooperations that are not condescending, at least on face value. African countries have become newly empowered by their abundant choices. Traditional power dynamics are changing. Countries like China and Russia are not using the superpower approach. Africa wants to take advantage of all these changing dynamics. America and her Western allies are taking too long to read the room. The superpower approach only worked when other superpowers allowed America to exert its influence unchallenged in some regions. The Russia-Ukraine war is actually changing that dynamic. And the engineering of perception that America and her Western allies enjoyed through corporate media is not working anymore, or at least it has been reduced. So either America and her allies read the room, or they continue to lose diplomatic grip like what we are seeing happening in Niger.